On this episode, I speak to another good friend of mine. He's an Australian, one of the best back three players to have ever done it. My partner in crime in Hong Kong. He's actually a big fan of Eddie Jones. It's the wonderful, the legendary Drew Mitchell. One of the biggest problems in Australia, and I was reading the stat, it might have been 3 years ago, but let's just say it was before the first test of the June series, that ballroom dancing was ahead of rugby in terms of participation numbers. And I thought ballroom dancing is like one-on-one. It could be obviously two-on-two. I don't really watch it, but tell me that stat was true just for the ban.
Mate, look, we're keen ballroom dancers down here. Absolutely. We'd like to shuffle across the dance floors. And it's been a tough time during this pandemic. None of us have been allowed to get up and dance. So I think that's probably why you've seen a surge in numbers in ballroom dancing. And and mate, it's pouring down rain here as well. So who'd want to go play rugby? You want to get inside and get a partner and have a little dip.
Right, I say that tongue in cheek, but it's not, because people think we might be taking the piss. But is it the case where rugby has been on its knees in Australia or not? Is that just a few kind of whispers? I know we've chatted over the last few years, and we'll get onto the positives now, but there was a feeling that rugby in Australia, rugby union, wasn't doing as well as people hoped, both commercially, both from a viewership, people turning up at the stadiums, and participation. Is that the case or not? Because we're going to look forward for the positives, but has rugby union been fucked in Australia?
Yeah, mate, I think we've got to, sort of call a spade a spade. And at the moment, it's been a tough few years. Probably not even a few years. It's been probably a bit of a decline for a while in terms of numbers. And we're in probably one of the most competitive sort of sporting markets, given that we've got Australian rugby, Australian rules football. You've got the rugby league. We've got cricket, soccer as well. And, I think our population's just hit 26 million. And there's just so many offerings now. And mate, to be honest, I think the whole concussion thing's probably really smacked rugby a little bit as well in terms of child participation and parents not wanting to put their kids into it. The other thing around, obviously, participation comes with cash, and the other sports that I just mentioned, particularly AFL, have got a really strong junior program called Auskick. Rugby league do us as well, because they're just so well funded, mate. Like each of the 16 teams in league and AFL have all got their own sort of like clubhouses and they just turn money out, mate. Like the amount of poker machines in some of these clubs and the membership drives that they have just mean that there's just so much cash for their junior programs and just more sort of touch points for these kids. We're doing it tough. I think for too long we've relied on the GPS schools, like the private schools, to really supply us with our future generations. And what we're seeing is the AFL really jumping into the GPS schools and to say, look, we can fund the programs, we can do this, we can give resources, give everything because I've got the cash. And whereas, rugby just sort of can't compete with that. So what that means, mate, is that we've been doing it tough for a while, but I think there's brighter light on the horizon with the next 10 years here in Australia. Look, it's by no means is it a foregone conclusion that we're going to rein that back in, but we've got a great opportunity firstly, we've got the World Cup next year in 2023 to really create some interest around the game. British and Irish Lions visiting 2025. We've got the World Cup hosting rights for 27. We've got the women's in 29. So there's a 10-year decade sort of period where we've got a lot of money coming into the game. So it's crucial that we make the most of this opportunity to make sure that when we get all this cash, we're putting in the right development pathway and grassroots programs to entice kids to join our game.
Is there a perception that the AFL and rugby league is safer than union or not? I know rugby league for me is barbaric, but I like watching it.
Yeah.
Is there a perception that that's safer than union or not? Or AFL, like you mentioned, the participation, because I don't want to get into the concussion stuff right now. It's one of them things that we're all talking about, we're all thinking about, but it is the kind of headline news around rugby union at the minute. Is it the same in league and in AFL? What's that like? Do they have similar protocols? Do they get injured? Is there concussion issues in that sport?
Mate, I think, rugby league they're probably fighting the same sort of fight that we're fighting. I think it's probably just AFL the narrative around AFL, I think, is a lot better in terms of being able to sell it, because it's not seen as much of a contact sport, because it's vast amounts of space. The bodies aren't as big. The collisions are seen to be not as impactful. But the one thing about AFL is you've got to be aware 360 degrees, right? Like, you can get attacked when you're going up for a ball and be unsighted, and someone come over the back of you, and you've got knees up and going for the ball and contesting. So I think they've probably been better at the narrative in which they're pushed out in the media, and certainly to the mums and dads. Rugby league, like you say, like it's a tough sport, mate. Like, you look at the state of origin, it's a bloody tough sport. So I think with them, it's probably not so much about pushing the concussion thing. It's more just about they've got a really big following and membership base and support here in Australia. And the other thing that makes it really difficult for us is we've got 5 professional teams here in Australia. Rugby league have 16, AFL have 18. So the other thing as well is that obviously just having more teams and more heroes and people to look up to, is you've got more players that are able to get out in the community and go alongside, and these kids can get selfies with them and really get to know their heroes. And it's difficult when we've got 5 teams and each of those teams representing the entire state, to really get out there and push that around the communities as well. So look, it's multi-layered, but yeah, the concussion stuff probably more so rugby union, rugby league. AFL, I think, have probably done better at controlling the narrative around that, and then obviously soccer, it's not really much of an issue.
And then Darcy Swain goes and headbutts Johnny Hill, just to throw it into the mix. But it's all right. He only touched him. He only headbutted him a little bit, so like he might get off.
Mate, I just think, on that, mate. The only reason there wasn't so much damage or impact is because it was at his full range. His neck didn't go he couldn't go any further. I just thought, I get it. I get what Johnny Hill did was wrong, right? Like, I get the hair pull. We don't want to see that in our game either. But Darcy Swain pulled his hair back. So if you want to go eye for eye, okay, they're all even, they're square. But you could just see, as they kind of separated, you just see the red mist come over Darcy Swain's face and just go, nah. Because earlier on as well, in what we saw in some of the footage, was Johnny Hill gave him a couple of open hands to the face, which again we don't want. But mate, like, how many times? Like, we know that you don't take things into your own hand, and we also know. I personally think headbutts are in the same sort of vein as elbows, gouges, spitting, that type of thing. You just don't do it, no matter what happens in our game, and I don't think we'll see him again in the series.
Oh, we won't. And that's the thing. Like, you could see, I don't know whether he's a posh lad, I don't know whether he's well educated. He don't seem like he's a street brawler, even though there was a bit of hair pulling. Yeah. You could see, I don't think what I'm trying to say is I don't think he's ever headbutted anyone in his life, because he's gone full long range and he's not even connected, but it's the intent. And I know what the guys are saying after, in terms of some of the stuff that I've seen, that it weren't that bad a headbutt, but you've just said it there. Like, he's had the red mist, and I can see, I've been there before. They were chasing each other around the pitch. I don't agree at all with hair pulling. I think that's a bit shithousery as well.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Goodness me. I mean, what's his background? Because I don't want to go too hard on him, because there's no doubt about it. He's going to be out of the series. The podcast will come out. This is going to be evergreen or whatever. But what's his backstory? Because you mentioned having players in Australia in union where people can kind of latch on to, become heroes. You look at Eben Etzebeth. Look, I mean, I don't think he's ever headbutted anyone. He might have. But in terms of the way that he plays, right? But you think of yourself and Gitz and Quaid, and the list is bloody endless. Nathan Sharp, John Eales. What's he like as a lad? Is he a bit kind of trying to build himself up? Is he a fake tough guy? Because we've been a bit harsh around him here. Let's talk him up if he is a decent lad.
Mate, he's honestly, like, all my interactions I've had with him with the broadcast stuff, he's a genuinely nice guy, softly spoken. He seems to be really well liked around the group, and I just think sometimes you just get some people sort of come through that want to impose themselves as a tough bloke and as an enforcer, but I just think they get it wrong. Like, to me, open hand slapping off the ball, hair pulling, head butting, that's not being tough. Like, being tough is the tough carries that no one else puts their hands up for off your own line, getting on the front foot, being tough with your shoulder and making sure, like, mate, when I was in counter-attack, back when I was playing, you get a ball in counter attack and you look up. There was a couple of genuine tough guys in the team that you just go, not going to go near him. Wycliffe Palu, thanks very much, but not going to run at your shoulder. Like someone like that, right? Like Cliffy Palu's just got a bit of an aura about him, but never because he headbutted someone or pulled their hair or did some off-the-ball incident. Like that to me is just not tough.
I mentioned some of the stars of Australian rugby gone by, and I put you in that category of stars that would be recognised globally, especially on the night outs. But when you look at the team now, and obviously Quade Cooper gets injured, we know Michael Hooper, Pocock's doing his own thing away, obviously, from rugby. There's not many where you're like, oh, no, he is. I'm watching it now, and I don't watch as much Southern Hemisphere rugby because there's so much up here that we need to consume.
Yeah.
There doesn't seem to be these superstars of years gone by. Obviously, there's been a change of guard. What is the lay of the land? Is that part of the plan? Are these guys superstars? Are we missing something?
No, mate, I think, honestly, we're kind of on the precipice with this next generation of stars. I mean, the guys that you mentioned, the Quades and the Jameses, they're sort of, 32, 33 years old. I think Quade's the oldest in the squad at 34. You've got Curtly Beale, who went into camp today just for a day. We won't be seeing him at least until probably, I would imagine, maybe the spring tour. But, it's the next generation that are coming through, and it's the Jordan Patayas that we've seen in Super Rugby Pacific that have stood up, but there's still, like, as you know, like, there's just, he's good, mate. Like, he's good, but he's still also got to be, like, he's only been on the scene for 2 years, and he's still got to, get exposed to this level and play there consistently so that he knows he can have the same impact at international level that he's been having at Super Rugby Pacific level. So the guys like him, mate, I actually really like Izzy Parisi as well. He didn't get a chance on the weekend, but I hope that he gets a chance at 13 or somewhere in the 3 games, just so that the eyeballs of the Northern Hemisphere can start to see some of these young guys. Rob Valentini, I think he's going to be someone that we know about and hear about for a long time. I think Samu Karevi's sort of in that, he's an older guy, but the impact that he has when he comes back to the squad is quite tangible, and you can see that. But Vunivalu, he's someone that talk. I don't agree with his position in the squad. I think he probably should be playing in Australia, right, at the moment. But there's a very real chance that he'll play this weekend, given that Tom Banks broke his arm, and then Kellaway went to fullback. Pataya maybe shifts to a wing. Either way, we're going to have one outside back come into that squad. Whether I think it probably should be Tom Wright in terms of performance, but on potential they may go with Suliasi Vunivalu. And so mate, I think moving forward, like Taniela Tupou, I think he's going to be someone that can really put his hand up to be a world class sort of international star that people sort of know about. He was a big loss. He was someone when he was ruled out going into that game, he was someone I was been really concerned about, given that so much of the England game is based around the set piece, the physicality, and he brings a lot of that. And not just him personally, but I think his presence in the team, I think, would lift a lot of blokes. And his presence when they're just about to pack a scrum, knowing that Taniela's there, his socks are down, he's chewing on his chewing gum, and he still just blasts through people. I think you know what it's like. There's always just someone in a team or in a squad that you just look across and you go, all right, we're going to be all right because this guy's playing. And I think Taniela's got that impact on the group. So there's a few guys definitely coming through. Tate McDermott could also be one of those guys. But I think what's important, and what I really like about Dave Rennie is he's not rushing to put all these young guys in at the same time, because it's one thing blooding them, but it's also blooding them with the right people around them as well. Because, as you know, like sometimes we see these young guys that hit the scene and we're just too much in a rush to see them at this level. And if they're not partnered with the right experience, the right voices next to them to calm them, to help them through their experience, then often we see them never hit the peaks of the development that they probably should be hitting. So I like how Dave Rennie's managing it at the moment.
Many people, to the point where someone stopped me in the street, actually in Edinburgh, and said, do you think Eddie Jones is trying to sabotage the English team ahead of the World Cup in a few years' time? You've worked with Eddie, right? And I think we've spoken about this, and it ain't looking for a headline like, is Eddie Jones sabotaging England? But there's a feeling right around Eddie that he might be sabotaging the England team, because right, we're in the media, okay? We're ex-players. We kind of know a little bit about what's going on. We can know and we can see if a player's good, if he deserves to be there. Danny Care, for example, he's been the best 9 in England for the past 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Billy's back to his best. Even when he's not at his best, he needs to be in the squad because he's one of them X Factor freak players. And Eddie don't pick him, right? He just don't pick him. And then with Faz, he drops him as captain, makes Courtney Laws captain. They're kicking off about that. There's so many things that you could talk about, right, with Eddie Jones. I like it because I'm in the media. I'm a quarter English, support England sometimes. But it gives us something to talk about. But you've worked with Eddie, right? And loads of people, the way the world is now, social media, everyone's got an opinion. It's become a little bit divisive. He clearly isn't well liked at the minute by the media in England and the general public. Well, especially the guy who stopped me. He might have been Scottish in the street in Edinburgh, so it doesn't really matter. What's your views on Eddie before we get into the game? Because you've worked with him, he gave you your first cap. Like, he seems like an engaging character, but he does seem a little bit kind of divisive and goes against what the general kind of consensus or the viewpoint is around players' form.
Yeah, look, I think the thing with Eddie is, right, like, yes, maybe the media don't like him, or the general public or the English supporters are off him at the moment, or they don't believe in him or don't back him anymore. But the one group of people that matters is whether he's got the dressing room, whether he's still being able to get the best out of them. And the one thing that I know from experience with Eddie is he's a really intense character, right? And look, this is my experience from 2004 when he picked me for the first time through to, I think, 2006, I think he was my coach. So, this is a long time ago, and I'm sure that he would have grown and developed as a coach. But the one thing he's really intense, like he demands absolutely everything. He'll squeeze everything out of you in every session, every team meeting, in your downtime, like everything, right? So sometimes, and that's why probably I was surprised, maybe not surprised, but, for him to be in that role for such a long period of time and still be able to try and still manage to get the best out of each of those players. And maybe that's why I think he went away from some of those players like Denny Kerr or Billy Vunipola, guys who have been in this, like under his tutelage for such a period of time, that maybe he felt like he wasn't able to get the best out of them because because it's a long period of time to be so intense with the coach, right? And maybe that's why also, like, he thought he could get the best out of some other players. And Eddie's been quite notorious through his career to pick players. Like Matt Giddo picked him without even playing Super Rugby cap, and look where that ended up. Like he has got an eye for it, but maybe that's sort of also where he was at. Like he's starting to see some of these younger guys, like even young Arundel. He's sort of got picked from nowhere after his try against Toulon, and then come up with another pretty handy try on the weekend on debut. But I think because of that, because of his intense nature, that what may seem obvious to everyone else, maybe he feels like within the team environment he can't get the best out of them through whatever it may be, whatever factors that are, whether it's Denny Kerr or Bunny Pollard or someone just not maybe not adhering to the intensity or not sort of able to mesh with the intensity for Eddie over the 5 or 6 years that he's been there. And maybe he felt that they needed a bit of time away, and then they come back reinvigorated. Who knows? But the biggest one, I think, is the question is, and mate, you've got access to some of those guys inside the squad, and maybe they're never going to say it on the record, but to get a real understanding of what's going on is to have one of them to say, mate, are you working with him, or you're working, are you doing it because you believe in him, or you're doing it kind of almost in spite, because I've been involved with coaches, and Eddie wasn't one of them because I was too young and I was trying to impress and everything. But when you get those intense characters, and you're just like you're almost like, mate, really, you're making me do that. It's just a lot. And I don't know. I think honestly, Eddie would be one of those guys because he's just he's a guy that demands so much from his team at every moment, mate, like every moment. And that's why he's meticulous. He's notorious for his meticulous preparation, no stone unturned. He would have had a thing to target Noah Lolosio after, if Quade was to go down early. All these types of things. He's so meticulous. But with that means there's got to be a real buy-in from every man in the squad, because it only takes one bloke in a squad of 30 or 35 on tour that gets their nose out of joint, starts talking to someone, get a bit of momentum, and then all of a sudden there's a bit of a fraction, and then you've got then it's a bit of a crisis.
It's over.
And I'm not saying that England are by any means near that at all. But that's the type of thing that I think would be, and probably has been, Eddie's biggest challenge in his coaching, is is making sure, and he's been really good at that, is making sure that everyone's on the same page and everyone's buying into what he's saying. Because the moment you start to disengage with a coach and start to not buy in and not buy all the things that they're throwing out there in team meetings and team talks, then that's when it's trouble stations.
But it's interesting the point you just made there around us being in and around the squad, knowing some of the lads, and I still know a few of them that are involved. And genuinely, I'd love to throw something out there and say, I've heard, I don't know, Billy Vunapola's not enjoying it, or my mate Bob Stewart, who's the physio there, is hating it under Eddie Jones. Genuinely, no one is saying anything. So I don't know whether they've signed NDAs. I don't know what's happened. But the genuine thing you hear is that actually he has a way of managing individuals. Like I go based on, not that we all believe what Hask says, but he's quite outspoken. He's obviously clearly got a good relationship with him. I know Dylan's made a few comments.
And Hask is also going to say what he thinks as well, right? Like, those guys, he can actually take their word.
Exactly. But I heard that Danny Kerr wasn't happy after he played with a second team against Japan. It might not have been Japan, but I think it was. And they didn't go that well. And then he went in and aired his thoughts. There was whispers around that. But everything else you're hearing is that, like what you've just said, ridiculously intense. But I suppose when you've got guys like Faz and stuff, who's probably a similar character to him, and you've got the young lads who are impressionable coming through, then maybe that is the case. But it is the kind of, I suppose, the media storm around him at the minute that he isn't the right man, maybe because of him not picking the right players, because the Six Nations hasn't gone well.
I think it's an easy one, right, for the media, okay? And we look at it, we probably went through something similar with Robbie Deans, back around the 2011 World Cup, because he was a Kiwi and because we weren't getting the results that we wanted, and because there was some selections that maybe some people scratch their head. Everyone's like, oh, he's a double agent. It's Robbie Deans, he's working for New Zealand. Like, I think it's just an easy out, and it's probably a pretty decent headline grabber, I would imagine, in the media as well. But yeah, I think the other thing is what my experience again with Eddie was whilst he was really intense, he also had a really unique way of just really calming you as well, and having a bit of a joke with players and just sort of getting that balance right. And sometimes you're always still a little bit like, okay, he's having a joke with me, but is he about to rouse on me? Or, like you're a bit unsure. But I don't know. I really enjoyed my time under Eddie. And like I said, it was a long, long time ago. But the fact that he's still, in those types of positions in World Rugby would mean that he's developed, his game and his coaching. And Eddie's also not the type of person, like in terms of his preparation for a team, it's not the type of person to just sort of say, I know everything about coaching and just stay there either. So I'm sure he's growing as well. But I can understand, because England aren't getting the results, why the media and some of the supporters would go, no, it's all Eddie. It's got to be Eddie's fault. His selections are poor because I think differently. But, maybe we're not blessed with the information that he's got, or the relationships that he's got with his players as well. And I would think that if Eddie got it together and gave everyone a pretty decent World Cup like he did the last time round, then people would forgive him for a couple of poor Six Nation campaigns.
Do you think he's trying to sabotage England then? Yes or no?
mate, I hope so. I really hope so. I don't think it's the case, but if so, it's a bloody genius move from Rugby Australia.
We'll talk a little bit about the game, right? So obviously the red card, losing Quaid, Tom Banks breaking his arm, that was bloody nasty. I can't believe they replayed it. I mean, he took it well, did he not?
No.
I would have been screaming.
Yeah, I was watching it. I actually watched the game with Kurtley Beale. He just arrived back in Australia only a day or two before.
How's Kurtley first?
Mate, he's good. He's good. It's good to have my little mate Kurtley back, and he's just living one suburb away from me with his in-laws, because he and his beautiful wife are expecting their first child in the coming months. So his world's about to change, but it was really nice to have him back. And
on that, Drew, what kind of dad will he be? What kind of dad will Kurtley Beale be?
Well, you know what? I asked him. I think he's going to be a real softie. I think Maddie, his wife, is going to have to be the disciplinarian, because I think KB is going to be a real softie. Look, he's emotional. We've seen him on the field as well. He wears his bloody heart in the sleeve, and that's what we love about him. He's, vulnerability is not an issue for Kurtley. So I think when he sees, he's having a little boy. So I think when he sees his little boy, I think he's going to be in a bit of trouble because that little boy is going to get away with a lot, and he's got that little fellow is also going to have a bloody lot of uncles that are going to show him the way and lead him astray, and we can't wait for it.
Oh, good on him. So you watched it with him, and what was the general consensus? I mean, did you see James O'Connor before? Let's start with that, because Dave Rennie almost went as far as saying we got James O'Connor down from the boxes. I'm sure he was about to say beer in hand when they lost Quaid to put him on the bench.
Well, you know what, mate? Like it's really weird because there's so many synergies here in 2005 with Adam Ashley Cooper's debut. So Adam Ashley Cooper came over as just one of the 5 younger guys that were just coming to the environment to kind of see and feel what the environment was about. And Elton Flatley got concussed in the warm-up, and Adam was there with beer in hand and a pie in his hand and in the stands ready to watch the game. And Chris Webb, who was the then manager, under Eddie Jones, is the current Wallabies manager as well, called him and said, mate, get down to the sheds. Because the protocol is, no matter whether you're in the 22, 23, the extended sort of the guys who warm up with the squad or the extended sort of hospitality group, you've got to take your boots just in case, right? So that's obviously paid dividends for them to have that have that protocol in place. But so Adam went down and he got his cap. So when I was watching the footage, and when I saw Sharon Flyhive, the doctor, Kieran Cleary, the physio, and Dave Rennie talking to Quaid was sort of pointing to his calf. And I said to Curtly, I said, mate, the fact that the doctor and the physio aren't even touching his leg means he's gone. Like there's no way he's coming back from that. Like if you get a slight strain and they're down there and they're trying to rub it out or they're trying to strap it up or whatever, they're trying to go out of their way to make it okay. I just looked at it and I thought, mate, this body language isn't good. They're not even attempting to try and get him back out there. He's not going to play. And I'm sure the call would have gone straight up to James saying, mate, because James has been in the squad and whilst he's fit to play, they just said he wasn't quite sharp enough. I actually think that's probably a bit of an indication they might have gone with James in the match day 23 had he been a little bit sharper. Just he hadn't played for a number of, a fair chunk because of injury through the Super Rugby Pacific. But just the way that they mentioned that he just wasn't sharp enough would have meant that, maybe another week or so and he would have played. So he was obviously fit to play, but probably not sharp enough to play, if that makes sense. So then he gets the call, down he goes, and we saw the footage, great access, like you mentioned, and Quaid in the dressing rooms, he's disappointed, but everyone going up there and just sort of, I thought it was, mate. You know what was really cold? There's a bit of footage. Quaid was sitting in his chair, and everyone's obviously coming up to say, sorry, mate, we're all good. And Chris Webb, the manager, went behind and just grabbed his jersey that was hanging behind him and obviously took it to go give it to Noah. Obviously, like it had to happen, right? But it was also like, just having everything you want to achieve in that week, for your team and also individually, just to have someone sneak up behind and take your jersey and hand it off to someone else. But that's the brutal sport that we live in. And Quaid, I thought took it really well. Like we've seen him, the way he speaks as well. Like he's very much about team first and putting others first. And I'm sure he probably would have tried. He could have probably tried to go out there and do a job, but probably knew in himself that he probably would have only had 5 or 10 minutes in him before he would have put the team in a similar predicament without an able-bodied backup like James.
Yeah, well, with Noah starting, it was cometh the hour, cometh the man, as they say in movies. And like you mentioned, Quaid Cooper, fair play to him, because he could have carried on. It's such a big game, high-profile game. He'd spoken about Marcus Smith in the lead-up. People are drawing comparisons to the two players. And then we're all thinking when we're watching it, for the reasons we've just spoken about, don't really know a load of the Australian players. Quaid Cooper, one of the best players in the world. James O'Connor's been in the bar upstairs. He's now on the bench. Do you know what I mean? We don't really know much about the Australian team. What do you make of the performance when you were there with Curtly?
Well, I was just going to say, you know what, mate? It was actually really lucky and advantageous for the Wallabies that it's a new James and it's not the James of old, because I think if it was the James of old, maybe 5-8 years ago when he was in the Wallaby squad upstairs in the hospitality suite, he would have come down with an absolute gut full of Swan Lager, and it could have been a different proposition. But I'm really proud of Quaid Cooper and also James O'Connor in terms of the just so how far they've come from them as young blokes, and it's something they speak quite openly about. So I'm not speaking out of school, and but yeah, I reckon. I mean, if it was me at the start of my career or the end of my career or right now where I sit, I would have probably had at least 6 schooners in my guts as well. So that's probably saying more about me than it is about the hospitality suites. But I just think, yeah, we're probably lucky that it was James now and how far he's come and how, just how committed and how much of a place is rugby and all that type of thing and where he's at off the field. Because it could have been a different James.
I feel bad now, Drew, because I am profiling him to the rumours that precede him. But I mean, I do like the bloke. He's obviously everything you've said that he's come through.
To be honest, he set up that profile, mate, and he hasn't shied away from that. Like as we all do, like we all make our bed, and if people have an opinion on things that we've done, then that's our own fault, really. So, don't feel bad about it because I've had my run-ins with those young boys as well at different times, and we've had some good discussions and heated discussions, and we've also grown through that as well. And that's why I'm so proud of it. But it could have very easily been. If it was, a number of years ago, James O'Connor coming down to sit on the bench, he could have been Barney Rubber with the burps on the sideline before going out. So, let's get on to Noah's performance. I thought, it was interesting. I had a chat on a radio show that I do with Matt Kiddo on the weekend, and he sort of mentioned being in that position, playing it as a 10. Sometimes it's actually probably not that you would do this every time, but for a young guy going up against England, in the first test, it can often be better to have the situation play out for Noah the way it did. Because if he's starting from the start of the week, and if he knows he's starting, there's so many opportunities to play that through in your head, how the game's going to go out, and play your game before it actually happens, and feel the pressure and hear the noise in the media, young guy against young guy, and the English forward pack and the pressure they're going to put on, all these types of things, right? So he would have probably been getting himself in the mindset set to play 20, 30 minutes off the bench off the back of, what Quade Cooper's gone out there and the foundations he's laid, and, gone out there thinking he's going to play a role. And now that role's changed and he's got literally 5 minutes to change, to think about that. And sometimes that's good because you don't have enough time to talk, to psych yourself out of things and to overplay it in your mind and to allow the pressure to get to you. And, I just thought that Noah went out there. Whether that was the case, I don't know. You'll have to ask Noah. But it just looked like he went out there with a lot of confidence. The players have really rallied around him, got around him. I think it was also great that he had an experienced half in Nick White inside him, Samu Karevi outside, who I thought played a really strong role, Samu, in terms of stepping up. He kicked a lot more than we're used to seeing Samu kick. So it was alleviating some of the pressure on Noah. I think having experienced players around him really helped him because obviously Whitey likes to kick off the base of the 9 and the ruck as well. I was really impressed with the way Noel went out there. But I just found it really interesting that Matt Giddo was sort of saying that type of approach can often play to your advantage when you don't have enough time to prepare for it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that hasn't surprised me, because I've seen it in a few games before, is the growth of the forwards of Australia. In terms of the scrum, my good mate, partner in crime, Petros du Plessis, has been doing the scrum. Jeff Parlin was involved with the line-out and stuff like that. Firstly, do you know much about Petros or not, Petros du Plessis?
Mate, obviously, I knew of him when he was playing. I've not had too much to do. I think I've had a brief conversation since he's been out here, but I was impressed with what he did, when he was playing. I think maybe even played against him towards when I was living over there in France, playing at Toulon. Yeah. But I barely spoke to the props in my team, let alone anyone on opposing teams. I remember Andy Sheridan was in my team one time. Just quickly to digress, but I used to call him Shandy because it was Andy and Sheridan, Shandy, and I was like, "Hey, Shandy, how are you?" He goes, "Well, that's not my name." I was like, "Well, what's your name?" He said, "It's Andrew." And I was like, "Yeah, but I mean, like, we're mates." Like, he said, "Well, no, we're not mates." And I was like, "What are we?" He goes, "We're more like acquaintance. No, colleagues. We're colleagues." And I was like, "Well," I said, "Mate, I'm going to become your mate, and I'm going to call you Shandy." And in the end, I only got his respect and the ability to call him Shandy with him not wanting to wring my neck by squatting 200. So that was as far as my communication go with props. But I like what Petrus has done. I like what he did when he was a player, but don't really know too much of him as a bloke.
Well, the reason I bring it up is that he's into the old injectables, not steroids, Botox. So if you see Dave Rennie, Tatsy, you see Jeff Parlin walking around with plump lips, that is all on Petrus du Plessis. So they're going to be looking $1 million. My thinking is it's a double whammy: scrum and looking $1 million. That's what I'm thinking. That's why they brought him in.
Okay, now it's time for a bit of truth tree, Jimmy. You look like you don't have any bags under your eyes. Have you had a couple of fillers, or you like
a couple of fillers? That is a compliment. I hand on heart can say it's the morning, right? It's the morning, not the morning after. It's the morning.
Yeah.
In the UK when we're recording, I'll take that as a compliment. I won't put the head down, but
oh no, look, you got a bit up there, but like you need to maintain some sort of frown lines or crow's feet. But I just felt under the eyes, you're looking impeccable.
Thank you. It's the quarter Chinese in me, which people think I'm taking the piss. You know, if you put my name in on Google, not that I do every day, but most days, just to check the landscape of media, it has Jim Hamilton, it has Jim Hamilton fight, it has Jim Hamilton rugby, Jim Hamilton podcast. So the legacy of my life. Fourth down, it has Jim Hamilton. Is he Chinese? Because people think I'm taking the piss. Like when I say it, and we've obviously spent some time in Hong Kong, when I say, quarter Chinese or whatever, I genuinely think people think I'm taking the piss. I'm not. So, and that you've just reaffirmed the fact that my eyes are very good and the underneath of the eye, my skin basically is very soft and smooth. And that is an Asian trait. I was going to say, Jesus Christ, that's the wine, mate. You got black eyes.
I know, mate. I get charged excess baggage as soon as I get out of bed.
It's a genetics that. It's genetics. You know, there is something for that. I'll speak to Petrus. He'll be able to sort that out. He'll just inject a few fillers.
Genetics.
Sweet.
Yeah, I might have to catch up with him. I'm going up to the Brisbane test a couple of days early. I might have to catch up with him, and I'll be looking an absolute $1 million on the coverage.
Is that Suncorp, is it? Is that the stadium?
Yeah, so it's at Suncorp. And look, the Wallabies do really enjoy playing there. It's probably far and away the best stadium to play at in Australia in terms of just like for like either rugby code, league and union. You ask any player, league or union player in Australia, Suncorp's the one because the crowd is so close. It's a custom built stadium for rugby league, rugby union, and they just love their rugby up there as well. So they'll be well supported, and it's also really close to the city. So you've got Caxton Street, you walk straight down. It's a good atmosphere, and and I don't know what it is, but we perform pretty well at Suncorp, generally speaking.
Because not that I've done a load of research into the second game, which is the pivotal one for both teams naturally, and that's the beauty of these 3 test series. So you mentioned the stadium there, obviously. Australia winning that first test the way they did, England came back towards the end, but it was a nothing thing. Have you seen enough in this England team to be worried, or is it the fact that Australia played mainly? I love this. Like he's sitting back, he's smiling with 14 men.
Like a peacock.
I know. There must be a feeling where you are because the scoreline flattered England in the end, really. So are you worried about game 2?
Mate, I think you've got to respect England going forward. I think they're going to make some changes. Whilst Australia had to change and adapt on the run, when something happens to an opposition, you also have to adapt and change as well. So, it wasn't just Australia having to change what they were wanting to do. I'm sure they would have probably had a pretty different game plan for Quade Cooper than they would have for Noel Olosiu. So, it's not just about Australia having to adapt and change their game. I think England would have, to a degree at least, had to have changed what they were thinking all through the week and what they prepared for as well. I just did see, though, that young, is it Tom Curry, the 7, has just been ruled out of the tour through concussion, which is, you never want to see anyone ruled out for anything, right? Let alone concussion, which we already sort of touched on. But, I think, he's a real world-class player and he's going to be a huge loss for them. We do, when I say we, Australian sort of supporters, we do take some encouragement from playing most of the game, well, however many minutes with 14, but also having to adapt to Quade's withdrawal, to Tom Banks getting injured, that type of thing. I think moving forward into this next game, we're pretty comfortable. I hope that I don't like when players involved in a team say hope in media interviews, because I think if you're in a team, you should believe, and if you're relying on hope, then you're probably. I think there's a lot to look into that when players say I hope, but I'm not in the team, I'm not in the squad. But I do hope they do.
But you're also come from a successful background. When I played for Scotland, it was only hope or luck. They were the two buzzwords.
Mate, unfortunately, I didn't have anywhere near as much success in the gold jersey that I would have liked. I definitely didn't hope for Toulon, but for some of the other teams, there's perhaps a little bit of hope. But I just engaged a little bit on Twitter when I was there watching with Curtly Bill the other night, and Joe Marler, who's obviously not playing but an English prop. He was talking about how the forward pack's going to smack and dominate the Wallabies, and I just replied with a LOL. And I think there was one other that I replied with LOL, and he's thrown out a challenge for this upcoming game. So if England win, I have to walk up Caxton Street, which is just a street of pubs, just absolutely filled to the brim with Aussies who look like they've been sent from England, all those years ago, in an English jersey, budgie smugglers, and singing "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot." So I put it on the line, mate. I think after that performance, I was pretty happy with what we put out there and the adjustments we can make moving into game 2. And I'm hoping that it's going to be Joe Marler in a Wallabies jersey somewhere in England.
Is that so? What's the reverse? So what will we see in England if Australia win?
Yeah, I don't know if it's I don't know what street or where he's sort of located, but he threw out the loser has to wear the opposing team's jersey and a pair of budgie smugglers and sing the anthem of the other team. So he'll be singing Advanced Australia Fair, hopefully. I don't know whether it's going to be straight after the game. I figured it's easy for me if the Wallabies lose, just to walk out of the stadium and up the street and get it over and done with, and I'll pay my dues, because that's what I do if that's the case. But I just think that Joe Marler is probably going to be the one wearing a Wallabies jersey.
You must be confident. I don't want to say that you're out of shape at the minute. You look comfortable, which is good. It's a good place to be. You're on the wine.
I wore a black shirt for those reasons.
Exactly. Just cover what's underneath. You're obviously going to wear a jersey or either of you is going to wear a jersey. Joe Marler is what he is. He's clearly a big unit. My
worry going into game 1 was around the physicality of it and the contest, right? Because our two teams that made the Super Rugby Pacific finals, Waratahs got dominated physically by the Chiefs, and the Brumbies got dominated physically by the Blues in the semi-final. So that was where I was probably most concerned, or at least a little bit, had the question marks over that part of the game. So I still think moving forward, that's where the game's going to be won and lost. When you allow players like Samu Kerevi to get on the front foot and either have the decision to run or kick, rather than being on the back foot and only having the decision to kick, or basically to run it in to set up for someone else to kick.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So budgie smugglers on the line. You reckon Australia are going to win game 2? Do you reckon it will be a whitewash? And if it is that underline the fact that Eddie Jones has sabotaged the England team?
Look, I don't think there's any sabotage going on. And I'm happy enough to make a wager with you now for a whitewash. And look, it just seems to be the thing to do with this series. But
I'm Scottish.
Yeah, I know, but you're also quarter England, which you told me earlier. So you do support them, and you're making me make some outlandish predictions here, which I always, I'm hesitant but willing to do so for you, Jim. I think it will be 3-0. I think we'll right the wrongs of 2016.
Yeah, cool. I reckon it'll be 2-1. I reckon it'll make a load of changes for game 3. I think Australia will win game 2 because of this Suncorp Stadium that everyone keeps talking about. Never seen it. Would love to see it. And I just think the fact that you lads had 14 men, played all right, a load of changes. I think the confidence going through the team, I just think it'll be 2-0 at the weekend and then 2-1, just because they'll all be hanging, apart from James O'Connor, who don't drink anymore. So they'll all be half cut for the third game.
Well, what about whenever we do catch up next? whoever's prediction's wrong, other one has to pay for dinner and a few wines.
Yeah, that will make that. I'm happy to do that, because either way I win, because I get to go out with Drew Mitchell. What do you think makes a good commentator? Now, this is one of the debates. Don't go on social media and get an opinion off there, because they just rinse everyone. But as an ex-player, and sometimes it's easy for us, isn't it? Oh, these journos haven't played the game. I've learned that isn't the way, because some of them are well read. They've been in the game a long, long time. There are still some old-fashioned ones out there that have never played the game and don't know much about it, but there are some out there that are really good. But there is a bugbear when you go on social media or when you watch games, that some of the commentators aren't amazing. What do you think makes a good commentator? It's a tough gig, and I say that like having done it myself. Like, it is a tough gig, getting the names right. Commentating on an England-Australia match, or a Scotland-New Zealand match, where every single player, they're rolling off the tongue. It's easy to pick them up. There's so much going on. There's a lot of work that goes in, but what's perceived as a good commentator or someone that's good on the TV? I really like Sean Maloney. I love the way that he interviews and his energy and stuff. What do you think makes a good one, though?
Well, mate, to be honest, that's probably something I'm still searching for. Like, I think you've just got to kind of understand and appreciate my position, like your own position, right? Like, and have this, like, I think what makes a good commentator, or what will make a good commentator, because I'm still striving for that, because mate, I'm a few years into it. Yes, I know the game to an extent, and that's but it's also how you then portray that to the viewer and keep them engaged and use your voice, because there's so many elements to it, right? It's not just what you're seeing, but how do you then convey that to the listener, or to the viewer? The other side of it is, I just think if you apply yourself with the same amount of application as you were as a player, as you are as a broadcaster, that's what I'm taking. That's the view I'm taking, right? Like, I'll take a notepad to everything. I'll try and learn. I'll try and get better. I want to be the best in the room. But I'm also aware that I go out there sometimes and I have poor performances and I make mistakes, and not everyone's going to have the same opinion of me and as I do. Sorry, but also that's okay as well. Like, there's no point having a panel of 4 people going into a test match all have the same opinions. So you may not agree with what I'm saying, but you might agree with what Tim Horn's saying. Or you may not agree with what I'm saying, but you might agree with Morgan Turinui or whoever it might be, right? And that's also so fine, because it creates good discussion. I think, like moving forward, like in my commentary career, I've just got to kind of keep trying to like apply myself like I would to a test match if I was playing. And so I look at all the different teams. I look at the different opportunities out there for the teams to take in terms of their style, their game plan, and all that type of thing, and ready myself so that when I'm out there, I guess I've got a bit of an understanding of what I might see, and then the other thing I probably fall into a bit of a category, and one thing I get from our big boss, the head of Channel 9 here at Wide World of Sports, he often texts me going, "Drew, take a breath, mate. Speak slower." Like, it's because I get so, like, I feel the atmosphere, and I'm just like, I get so excited by it, but it often can be probably a little bit difficult for people to kind of engage in, because I'm so excited. But often it's just about matching the energy of the people that you're with as well. When Shawnee stands up, Sean's like is a different one. He takes his shoes off. He likes to feel the ground, and and he likes to stand up.
Hang on. What do you mean he takes his shoes off?
So in the commentary gig, he's got his cans on, he's got his headphones and his mic. He'll take his shoes off just underneath, and he stands there and he's he's up and he's active. When he's playing, like when the boys are playing, Shawnee, and I'll try and get a bit of footage of it. But Shawnee takes his shoes off and he's up there and he's going, and I just think I can't match that energy if I'm sitting down in my chair looking like this, right? So I feel like, okay, I've got to get up, because it's also, Shorty's like, "Oh, got to whatever it might be," and then I just go, "Yeah, it was a great try." Like it's sort of, it doesn't mash, right? Like, you've got to have that good synergy and connection as well, and you can't do that, I feel, if I'm sitting down and Big Shawnee, these shadows like drowning me out. So I think you've got to have a good relationship with the people you do it with, and I'm really lucky that the people that I work with at Stan and Channel 9, I'm really fond of as people as well. So I don't know. That's a roundabout way of saying I don't really know what makes a commentator, mate, a good commentator, but I'm trying, and I'm loving the opportunity to be able to get to try and grow in that position.
Right, last question before we go. I asked this to a few of the guests that I chat to on the Big Jim Show. State of rugby at the minute. Give us a couple of lines on where we're at in terms of just across the board, commercially, growth, engagement, player welfare. I know there's so much we can talk about, but it is a kind of topic that I'm trying to get to the bottom of. On the other side of the world, how does rugby union look from there?
Mate, I think the one area we need to get into is obviously North America, right? We need to tap into that market. It's such a huge market. Obviously, 2031 hosting rights for the Men's World Cup and thereafter. It's huge. But I think one thing that American sport does really well, and you look at Premiership, the Premier League in soccer, football, or whatever, wherever you live in the world, whatever you term it, is whilst there are team sports out there, there's also a huge emphasis on individualism and the individual profiles. And I don't know if because part of our values in rugby is about humility and it's about respect and all these things, that we quite often don't like to talk up the individual. I think we really need to start embracing the individuals of our game, the characters in our game, and really promote them so that we get people to engage. I think we should have our last names on our test jerseys so that every photo, every bit on content, social media, that people know who they are. They can quickly identify who they are, all these types of things, merchandise. Then you can buy your own, your jersey with that number and that particular name, all those types of things. I think there's a lot we can do off the field to help engage the wider sporting public. And I don't know, I think the state of the game's strong, but like anything, I think if we keep relying on the things that have got us to this point, we're going to stay at this level. So we've got to find new ways, whether it's also, I don't know, NFTs, all these little things, broadcasting. We've got to find ways to not just get buy-in from the supporters and the fans, but get buy-in from the current players, because the current players embrace what it is to endorse and get exposure in our game, then it's just going to go, we could go to a next level.
Drew Mitchell, thanks very much. Good luck for the rest of the series. This is evergreen on the Big Jim Show, so tell all your mates about it, and we'll get Sean Maloney and Russell Crowe on at some point. Now, Russell Crowe first, John me second, Sean Maloney third, and get Gitto's number 4.
Mate, love your work, and mate, really looking forward to catch up in the person.